She walked out on me. Now she's back with a baby, begging for another shot. IATA for slamming the door in her face.
You think you know someone, especially the person you've shared your life with. But what happens when the person you love suddenly disappears without a trace? What do you do when the woman you once envisioned a future with, raising children, growing old together, leaves you in a cold, silent void? For years, I thought we had it all figured out. A perfect marriage, plans for a family, and dreams of a life together. But everything crumbled when the woman I loved started changing in ways I couldn't understand. The distance between us grew, and before I knew it, she was gone. And then, one morning, she knocked on my door with a baby in her arms, begging for a second chance. The question that haunted me: was I wrong to shut the door in her face, or was this the closure I never knew I needed?
In the years we spent together, I had always believed that we were solid. Our love felt invincible. Two people with the same dreams, the same vision for the future. We started planning our family from the very beginning, and it became a ritual of sorts. Late nights spent talking about baby names, nursery themes, and the life we would build together. We were a team, united by our shared dream. I thought we were ready, eager for the next chapter. But then, the news came like a punch to the gut. We were at the doctor's office, hoping for good news. Instead, the words that followed shattered everything I had believed to be true. You may never be able to have children naturally. It hit me hard. The weight of it settled over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of failure. But I wasn't alone. She was there. Or so I thought. She told me it didn't matter, that we could still have a life together, just the two of us. At first, I believed her, convinced that love would make everything okay. But soon, I began to notice the change in her. The conversations about children stopped. The dreams we once shared seemed to disappear. She grew distant, cold. Small jabs about my appearance, my health, my inadequacies became regular. I couldn't understand it. I wanted to talk, to fix things, but she would dismiss my concerns, telling me I was being paranoid. I watched her pull away, and yet I convinced myself that everything would get better. After all, we had been through so much together. But when she suddenly told me she was going on a girls' trip, I had no reason to doubt her. I packed her bags, sent her off, and wished her well. But when she didn't come back, I realized something was terribly wrong. My world was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. I had no idea that this was just the beginning.
The hours turned into days, but the silence grew louder, suffocating me for every passing second. I tried to convince myself that she was just tired, that something had come up during her trip. Maybe her phone died, or maybe she was caught up in a last-minute adventure. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called her over and over, but there was no response. I texted, hoping for the reassurance of a simple message, yet nothing came through. As the night stretched on, a gnawing fear settled in my stomach, a dread I couldn't shake. It wasn't until the next morning that the panic fully set in. I called her sister, her friends, anyone who might have seen or heard from her. I even went so far as to contact the airport, thinking she had missed her flight or maybe got caught in some kind of emergency. But nothing. My heart sunk as the reality hit me like a freight train. She was gone. Completely gone. She hadn't been on any trip at all. It was a lie. She had disappeared without a word, without a trace. I kept trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that this was just some kind of mistake. Maybe she had gone somewhere else. Maybe she had a reason. But the more I tried to reason with myself, the more the pieces started to fall into place. The coldness, The distance in the months leading up to this, the sudden disappearance, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. She had left me, and I couldn't even understand why. The woman I had once called my partner, my best friend, was now a stranger, and the man I had become was someone I didn't recognize either. I was spiraling, and there was no one to hold on to.
Days turned into weeks, then the gnawing emptiness that had settled in my chest grew stronger. I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't understand how someone I had spent so many years with could vanish so easily. Was it me? Had I missed the signs? My thoughts raced in endless loops, each one more suffocating than the last. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, unable to wake up, unable to make sense of the reality I was facing. Every place I went, every room I entered, I was haunted by her absence. I kept calling, hoping for the faintest hint that she was safe, that she hadn't abandoned me, but I never received a response. It was as if she had slipped off the face of the earth, leaving no trace, no explanation. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she reassured me before she left. "Thank you for being so supportive," she had said. The words seemed so sincere at the time, but now they felt like a cruel joke, a lie wrapped in sweetness. She had disappeared without a word, and I was left with nothing but confusion and disbelief. In my desperation, I reached out to her family. Her mother was just as bewildered as I was. She hadn't heard from her daughter either. It was like she had simply erased herself from our lives. I spent countless hours at her family's house, talking to her mother, trying to find answers, but all I got were more questions. Why had she left? What had happened? And why hadn't she said goodbye? The uncertainty was unbearable, and I found myself losing grip on everything: my sanity, my sense of self, and the man I once was. I was drowning in a sea of unanswered questions when the phone rang. It was her mother, and for a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation. But what she said next would rip the ground out from under me. "She's gone, and she's not coming back." The words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. I was numb. I had spent so long trying to understand, trying to fix what was broken, but now it was clear she had already made her choice, and I was left standing in the wreckage of our life, alone and unmoored.
The days that followed felt like a blur. I wandered through my life, a hollow version of the man I once was. The weight of her absence pressed down on me with every breath, every step I took. I went through the motions, but nothing felt real. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the empty side of the sheets, imagining her there beside me, even though I knew it was impossible. The silence was deafening, and the loneliness was suffocating. But then something shifted inside me. I had to stop wallowing in despair. I had to move forward somehow. I couldn't let her have the power to destroy me, to take everything from me. For weeks, I'd been consumed by thoughts of her, where she was, why she left, what I had done wrong. But those questions would never have answers. She had left, and nothing would bring her back. And that realization, as painful as it was, gave me clarity. I decided to take control of my life again, to rebuild myself piece by piece. I threw myself into work, poured myself into hobbies I had neglected, and reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. I started to exercise again, focusing on my physical health in a way I hadn't in years. Slowly but surely, I began to feel the fog lifting. For the first time in months, I started to feel like myself again. But even with all the progress, there were still moments when I would remember the good times, when she would laugh, when we would talk about the future. Those memories still haunted me, but they no longer had the power to break me.
I had found a new sense of strength in the chaos. And when I finally realized that I could live without her, that I didn't need her to be happy, that was when I truly started to heal. I wasn't sure if I was ready to love again, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer willing to let my past define me. It was time to let go. It was time to move on. And no matter how hard it had been, I was finally free.
The silence was finally starting to fade, and I began to feel like I was getting my life back on track. I had started to heal, rediscovering parts of myself I'd forgotten along the way. But just when I thought I was safe from the wreckage she had left behind, the doorbell rang one Saturday morning. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the door, uncertain whether to answer. I hadn't heard from her in months. What could she possibly want now? I opened the door slowly, and there she was, the woman I thought I had lost forever, standing before me with a baby in her arms. Time seemed to stop as I looked at her, my mind racing, trying to process what I was seeing. She looked older, more tired than the vibrant woman I remembered, but there was no mistaking her. And then her words, "Can I come in? I need to explain." The shock hit me like a freight train. How could she come back like this, after everything she'd put me through? The audacity, the nerve. She had vanished without a word, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life I barely recognized. And now she was standing at my door, asking for a second chance? The anger surged through me, sharp and intense, but I forced myself to remain calm, to keep my composure. I couldn't let her walk back into my life without understanding the full scope of the damage she had caused. I didn't want to hear her excuses, didn't want to listen to her plead for forgiveness. The thought of it sickened me. She had already broken me once, and now she was standing here with a child, our child, she claimed, asking me to pretend like nothing had happened. She said she had realized her mistake, that she wanted us to be a family again. But how could I just erase all the pain, all the betrayal? How could I forget the months of torment and the feeling that I wasn't enough for her? I stood there, looking at her with the baby in her arms, and a strange sense of clarity washed over me. She wasn't the woman I had loved anymore. She had changed, and I had changed too. I had rebuilt myself from the rubble she left behind, and I wasn't about to let her destroy me again. The truth hit me hard. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn. I closed the door. I couldn't let her back in. Not like this. Not after everything. I had finally found peace in my own life, and I wasn't willing to risk losing it again. I thought closing the door on her would bring me peace, but the reality was far from that. I could still hear her muffled sobs and desperate pleas from the other side. The sound of her voice, so full of regret and brokenness, seeped through the cracks, making it harder to ignore the turmoil within me. I stood there, frozen for a moment, my hand still on the door handle, wondering if I had made the right choice. But as I heard her voice crack and her words became more frantic, something in me hardened. I had been through so much, fought so hard to reclaim my life, and now she expected me to open that door again, to let her waltz back into my world like nothing had happened. My stomach churned with a mix of fury and disbelief. She had the nerve to try to guilt-trip me, telling me how hard her life had been without me, how she had learned her lesson and was ready to make things right. The audacity of it all. She was trying to manipulate me, to make me feel sorry for her after everything she had done. I couldn't take it anymore. I slowly turned the lock and opened the door just enough to see her face. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked so small, vulnerable even. But I knew this was a game she was playing. She had already shown me who she really was, and I wasn't going to fall for it again. "Enough," I said, my voice firm, cutting through her pleading. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. There's no second chance for us." The look in her eyes was one of shock, as if she couldn't comprehend that I had finally let go. And for a split second, I almost felt guilty for not giving her a chance.
But then I remembered how much I had suffered, how many sleepless nights I had spent questioning myself, questioning our entire relationship. I wasn't going to let her back in, not this time. With a steady hand, I shut the door, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief. It was over, and as her muffled screams faded into the distance, I knew I had made the right decision.
In the weeks that followed, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time: control. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without the weight of her decisions hanging over me. I filled my days with new routines: long walks in the morning, dinners with friends I hadn't seen in years, late nights spent reading books I had long forgotten. Slowly, piece by piece, I was rebuilding my life. I was rediscovering who I was, who I used to be before her shadow loomed over me. The pain didn't go away completely, but it became more manageable, like a bruise that would eventually fade. Yet, the guilt still lingered, like a quiet voice whispering in the back of my mind. I knew she had to have been struggling too, right? Maybe things hadn't gone as planned with the child, or maybe her life had unraveled. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if somehow I had been too harsh. Was she just a product of her own fear, making the mistakes she did out of desperation? But every time I replayed her words in my mind, the lies, the manipulation, I couldn't bring myself to pity her. No, she had made her choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. I had spent far too long trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. I realized that the more I focused on what I'd lost, the less I could see what I was gaining. The new version of me was stronger, more independent, and most importantly, at peace. I had finally found freedom, and it was in the quiet. The silence that once felt like abandonment now felt like a refuge. The man who had been so willing to bend for her was no longer here. He had been replaced with someone who valued himself enough to walk away, to say no, and to never look back. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could truly move on.
Just when I thought I had reclaimed my life, that I had finally gained the freedom I had fought so hard for, the unexpected happened. The doorbell rang again, that with it, a rush of panic hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't prepared for this. I hadn't thought about her for days, not in the way I once had. I had moved on, started to breathe again, but there she was, standing on the other side of the door with a child in her arms. A baby. My baby. I couldn't process it at first. My mind went blank. The woman I had shut out months ago, the woman who had shattered me, was now standing there, asking for another chance, asking for forgiveness. I had thought I was done with her. I had thought I was strong enough to never look back. But here she was, her eyes pleading, and the baby in her arms, a stark reminder of everything that had once been broken between us. She didn't say much at first, just a soft, "I need to talk." And for a moment, I almost let her in. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But then I remembered the years of betrayal, the lies, the coldness. She had left me without a word, without a second thought. The pain I had buried under layers of new routines and healing came rushing back in a surge of anger. She was asking me to forgive, to pretend it all didn't happen. But I couldn't. "Why now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me with those eyes, the ones I once thought I knew so well, but they were different now. I had changed, and so had she. And as I stood there staring at her, the truth hit me. There was no going back. I had finally found peace, and it was mine to protect. I closed the door, this time without hesitation, without doubt. It was over.
The door had barely clicked shut before I was consumed by a storm of emotions. Her pleading face, the baby she had brought with her, Everything about the moment felt like a cruel twist of fate. I had thought I was done with her, that I had moved on, and yet there I was, standing on the other side of the door, overwhelmed by doubt and anger. For a brief, fleeting second, I almost let her back in. The words she had said about making things right, about starting over, played on repeat in my mind. But I couldn't forget the years of cold indifference, the way she had left without a trace, as if I had meant nothing to her. I had to remind myself of everything she had done. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had turned her back on me when I needed her most. She had been the one to walk away first, without even an explanation, leaving me to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. And now she was standing there, expecting me to drop everything, to embrace her and the child she claimed was ours, as if we could pick up right where we left off. "Why should I believe you now?" I asked, my voice sharp, cutting through the air. Her face faltered for just a moment, and in that instant, I saw the woman I once loved, broken and vulnerable. She tried to justify herself, to explain how she had made a mistake, how the baby had made her realize what she had lost. But her words felt hollow, like a rehearsed speech, a desperate attempt to make me forget the truth of what she had done. I stood there, fighting the urge to crumble, to give in to her manipulation. But I had learned the hard way that no amount of apologies could fix what was broken. She had chosen to leave me once, and I couldn't allow myself to be her safety net again. This time I was stronger. This time I would not let her rewrite our story. Without a word, I turned and closed the door. This time I knew there was no going back. It was truly over.
The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there in the hallway, the weight of my decisions settling over me like a heavy fog. I had closed the door, but it wasn't just the door to my house. I had closed the door to any hope of us ever being the same again. She had begged for a second chance, but what she didn't understand was that second chances aren't given to those who've already destroyed everything they touched. I had spent months picking up the pieces of my life, and now here she was, expecting me to open the door and let her back in as if nothing had happened. The reality of it hit me all at once. She had walked away and I had survived. She wasn't the person I remembered, and neither was I. We were both different, changed beyond repair. And no matter how much she pleaded, no matter how much I still wanted to believe in the love we once had, I knew it was over. The woman who stood on my doorstep wasn't my wife anymore. The love I had once felt had been replaced by something else, something harder, more resolute. I had to let go, even if it hurt. I wasn't going to let her destroy me again. This time, I was choosing me. No more second chances. It was over.